because we come from communities where the truth doesn't always reach the headlines, but it lives in what we face every day. This is Changing Trends and Times, bringing clarity and context to the issues shaping our lives right now. No spin, no distractions, just real talk rooted in real impact. Now, are you ready to lean in and bring your voices into the conversation? Then, allow me to introduce to you a man committed to asking the questions that matter and breaking it down so we all understand. Your host, Charles King.
Good evening, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Changing Trends and Times. Welcome you guys to the series finale of our four-part series, Left, Right, Black, and the Political Parties and the Fight for Representation. Today's finale of this series is Leverage, Black Political Power in the 21st Century. This is very important for this series, and this is very important in this wrap-up. I want to thank each and every last one of you for tuning in and for watching, because this episode truly sets off the whole entire tone as to what it means of having representation and being in the Black community. So let me just set the scene for you at first. Well, first of all, before I do all that, I want to thank each and every individual that's been following us. And for those of you that actually, have been following us from the onset, I want to thank you. And I hope that your continued support of us is on the continuum. So let me just give you this synopsis, because I want you guys to get this as to where I'm going. I'm going back to when Barack Obama had won president in 2008. So on the night of November 4th, 2008 in Grant Park, Chicago, Illinois, something happened that millions of Americans, Black Americans above all, had been told would not happen in their lifetime. A Black man was elected president of the United States. The moment carried the full weight of history, of Reconstruction's broken promises, of Jim Crow's long shadow on the marches on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, of every suppressed ballot and silenced voice stretching back across 160 years. It felt to many like an arrival. But arrival and power are not the same thing. And in the years that followed, through the Tea Party's racially coded fury, the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, the police killings that sparked a movement, and the relentless machinery of voter suppression, Black Americans discovered once again that political progress in America is never linear, never secure, and never granted freely. It must be organized, it must be demanded, it must be defended. And so in this episode, as the series finale of Left, Right, Black, and it encompasses the full sweep of Black political life in the 21st century, from Obama's historic election to the emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement, from the Supreme Court's Shelby County decision to Stacey Abrams registering hundreds of thousands of voters in Georgia, from the 2020 election in which Black voters effectively decided the presidency, to the question that now confronts every Black voter, organizer, and elected official in America. After all of this, after all the marches and the votes and the sacrifices, what does real political power actually look like? So what we're going to get into in this episode, what I want you guys to understand as you get the gist of this episode, what I'm going to do is I'm going to comb through, from what was to what got to be to where we are today. And what we're going to be talking about as well is, as we think about Black representation, because that is now becoming a problem, that should now Black people actually start organizing and forming their own party. So as we go through this, I just want you guys to make sure that you're following this because it's very important for you guys to understand. Okay, so as we talk about the Obama election, which had the historic turnout and its political significance, what happened at that particular election was the black vote, which lit up the whole entire country, all of America. In every state, black voter turnout was at an enormous high. President Obama won that 2008 election with 90% of the African American vote. That other 10% is always going to be that 10% because there's 10% of African Americans that do not, for some strange reason, don't think that the cultivation and the unification of African Americans is a good thing. So that 10% does not matter. But it's that 90%. That's what I'm talking about. And what's the gist of this series is about voter suppression. So what they did, what the Obama campaign did, is they actually went out and they actually did a ground roots campaign. They got on the ground. They put boots on the ground in every state. And they went and they canvassed. And they got people not only to register to vote, but these people came to the polls and they voted. A lot of them were first-time ever voters. Don't care how old they were first-time voters. But since that election, those people and the turnout has been synonymous. It's been large. So as we go through the historical context of this, you know, with President Obama winning his initial campaign in 2008, what spun off from that, because as we know it today, is that every step that's taken going forward in the Black communities always give back a few steps or more. And so what spun off from that was the Tea Party. And the Tea Party was a spin-off, and the backlash to that was its racial undertones. Okay? And so with that, it almost reminded me, as I think about this and as we started this series, it makes me think about when Reconstruction was first enacted, when it first came to be. Because if you think about what happened then, Black representation and the leadership of the country was actually building towards a democracy. The country was being ran by Black elected officials. Most people don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. The country was being led by Black elected officials. And so what was happening is that as things were running smoothly and we were well on our way in those first 10 years, had we got through those first 10 years, America would be a real democracy, because it's not a democracy. And so what happened then, back in 1875, was all of the racial violence, all of the killings. I mean, just the violence was just synonymous. It was synonymous. The insurrection was one that actually changed the tone of the country. So as we speed forward to 2008 and the Obama campaign had the same participation. Okay? Black voters came out to vote and all was well, right? Well, what started in that point is on day one after the inauguration, the Republican Party led by Mitch McConnell made one promise, and his promise was that we're going to make a promise that we will never do anything to support this president, and we will make sure he's a one-term president, and we will not cooperate with anything they want to do. Up pops the Tea Party. And the Tea Party, with its racial undertones, came where they actually, well, let's say in the Congress and the Senate, they, well, initially, the Obama administration held control of the entire government. That was from the executive branch to the legislative branch. Okay, they had control of the government. That was the House, the Senate, as well as the presidency. And so, as they're doing what they needed to do, is when they came up with the legislation of the Affordable Health Care Act, which Mitch McConnell is the one that gave it the name Obamacare, because they were trying to prevent people from wanting to get the great services that they needed to have for themselves as far as health care. Now, let you know to this day that is that we're at the point now that the Affordable Health Care Act, they knew that it was going to need work, and that it was something to build on from a foundational point that would have escalated to take care of each and every individual. But now with the Tea Party roots and with the Republicans and their hatred, they were trying to block this. Well, it passed, it got through. They took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Democrats and the Affordable Health Care Act. So now, remember, America is the only country, the only standing in leading country here in this world that still was not doing universal health care to take care of all of its people. Now, the question still that people should be wondering is, why is that? Why is that? Well, I tell you why. That is because as long as they can get away with this and they can continue to take money from those that need it and convince those people in those areas that Black people were taking something from them, then they knew that they have already created the rift, and the rift will continue. And that's where we are today. Because people, for some strange reason, white people still believe that Black people are taking something from them, and we're not taking anything from you. Not anything. Not taking not one iota of a thing from you. Now, this is what's causing the divide. This is what's causing all of the fighting. This is what's causing all of this violence today, but nobody wants to speak truth to the power of that. So, after the Tea Party situation, there was voter ID laws, the gerrymandering, and the war on the Black vote. All around the country after that 2008 election, I mean, they were trying to, most of these states, especially southern states, were trying to come up with all of these new voter ID laws, trying to make registering to vote. They were trying to make that difficult. They were trying to make it difficult for people to go to the polls to vote. You had people that were popping up out of nowhere trying to bully people at the voter places where you go to vote, and all of this was going on. Now, while this is going on, now I just want you to understand, it's unlawful for anyone to sit there and say they're going to stand over somebody and watch them vote, or they're going to be standing out there because they want to control what they thought was, fraud in voting. There was no fraud. But I will tell you, the fraud that was founded in between that time, that's even up to today. Every time they find somebody that's fraudulent voting, it's on the Republican side. Ain't that something? Ain't that something? The pot calling the kettle black, and it's the one that's causing all the problems. Now, they're talking about people on the Democratic side and folk in the Black community, which we know is not true, were taking the names of dead people and voting, when it's factually been proved that those were Republican folk and they were white. So, again, that's how that goes. But, we're going on into this historical context because I want to make sure that you guys understand as we get into the show what's really happening here. Because now we get to where the Black Lives Matter protest gets into play into 2013. And so with what they were doing is also for the same reason, is that, in getting people out, not only out to vote, but shining a light on police brutality and the killing of Black people, and particularly Black men. And so when this came to be, okay, it lit the fire for people to get out and more than just vote, but to use your rights where you can actually peacefully protest, for issues and situations that you felt were affecting you. Well, they come up with where there were like so many different things that transpired here that it's kind of hard to put a thing to say, well, this is one thing over the other. But I'll just put it to you like this. This is a situation to where the organizing of that many young Black people had political pundits and politicians on the Republican side were, as they say, they were like just behooved to see this many Black folk being organized and actually coming together. So what that did is that allowed them to create a situation of saying that there was a whole bunch of violence and there was a whole bunch of breaking into buildings and looting and things of that nature. And come to find out, these were plants that were put into the protest that was doing this, but they weren't Black people. Now, where we're getting to is where the situation got even better when it came to voting, because Stacey Abrams, when she was then the minority House leader here in the Georgia State House, and she started some grassroots organizations, that actually did what they were supposed to do in order to get people out to vote. Well, so what's happened then is she came up with a fair fight. Okay. And this is the model. This is the model that I'm still not understanding to this day. When this model was created, that there's no other major Black metropolitan city with Black representation did nothing to come behind this model to follow it, because what Stacey proved is that what Stacey did was she came out and she was got people out to vote, because what they did was they did the ground canvassing as well. And they went all the way out into South Georgia, into the rural areas where people's votes were repressed. There were no voter places for people to go vote, but except for one or two places. And they had to drive these miles and miles and miles in order for people to get to where they needed to go in order to go vote. Well, so with that being said, fair fight and what they did basically changed everything as to the senatorial races that was back in 2018 in 2019 up to 2020, as well as the presidential election of 2020, in which Georgia flipped blue and voted for Joe Biden. And so the thing about that model is that when you could see what had transpired and why this happened was the thing that basically puts it into play as to why are Black people looking at the Republican Party or the Democratic Party as a place to lean on instead of creating its own party. Because Ground Roots clearly showed that all of the votes and all of the folk that came out to vote, Black people voted in droves. They voted in droves. And so it's not only did this happen here in Georgia to where it was just the Black vote, it was all of the minority vote. All of the minority vote escalated. All of it. And it changed the entire scape as to what's here in Georgia right now today. And so I want to say, for those that feel like the truth is too much for you, I'm sorry if that's the case, but I am going to tell you this. There is no divide when there is the truth. If the truth divides you, then that means you have a problem, that you cannot understand what's real and what's false. And if you don't understand what's real and what's false, I mean, heaven help you, but I'm putting the facts out here for you because you need to understand, Mr. and Mrs. whomever you are, that think that it's causing a problem to speak on this. It's not a divide. It's a divide because what the truth is the truth hurts you, Mr. or Mrs. whomever you are, that can't stand the facts of knowing that what's happening with the Black population is definitely repression, is a problem, and it's a serious case of racism that you here in the 21st century don't understand. So you need to just listen, and you can get this information for yourself, and you can decide if you still want to be a racist or if you want to be an actual American. That's what you need to do. So, as we get into this, so the breakthrough with the Obama's election, okay? There were so many people that got out to vote. And when those people came out to vote, they came out to vote in droves. And they did this because they knew that they wanted to put this candidate in the White House. So along this whole entire country, where people were trying to repress the vote, they honestly did not think that Black people would come out and vote, which they still don't today. But not, well, I take that back. They know that Black people come out to vote today, so now they're going back to trying to repress the vote. So what the Obama campaign did is they got out and they did ground roots. They went all over this country. That is from the South to the Midwest to every part of America that even contended to be the rural areas to get people out to vote. They didn't say, oh, come vote for us because we're Democrats. They said, come vote because your vote matters and it counts. Again, people that want to stay repressive always will believe that unless it looks like it's white controlled, it's a problem. Well, I tell you, from the founding, as I said, going back to 1875, when this country was ran great by Black leadership to set the foundation for this country today, the violence and the insurrectionists changed that because they went to start killing people. the black political officials were assassinated and killed by white racists. This is how the KKK came into play. This is how all of these hate groups came into play. And this is how the system was changed to what we had today. So now that we got up to 2008, and we're moving past the first election of President Obama, coming into his re-election term, starting in 2012, is when Fair Fight and Stacey Abrams' group got together. They made a difference that brought into the 2020 election here in Georgia, where it flipped. So for those of you, let's take it into some context. When Stacey Abrams ran for governor against then Secretary of State Brian Kemp for governor, she ran against him as Secretary of State. This man purged voter rolls. He put in suspension more than 320,000 people's names to disallow their votes to count. These were black votes. This was the black community. Now, for talking about a division, you, Mr. or Mrs., whomever you are, was that fair? Was that racist? Or what was that? Tell us about that. Since you think that this is a divide, the divide should be what it is. So tell us about that. There's not a divide. What it is facts. And I'll say it again, it's facts. Go check it for yourself. So what happened after that point? Now we're going past Obama's election and we're going to get to 2013 after he wins re-election. Now we had Shelby v. Holder, okay, which was Secretary of State for President Obama, where the Department of Justice, did not allow Shelby County to do what they did because, according to the pre-clearance precluded any state from changing what they said was their voter laws and what they wanted to make come into place. Which means they were trying to repress votes and take people out of their seats that held seats for districts. This started with Shelby County in 2013. That's Shelby County, Alabama. And for those of you that are not familiar, I'll tell you this. If you're familiar with Highway 280 going through Birmingham, Alabama, you take 280 all the way around into Auburn, you go through Shelby County, you will know exactly what that looks like. I'm telling you where it is. Go look it up and go find it. And you will see what that looks like and why this was so important. Because the Supreme Court overturned the pre-clearance part of the Voting Rights Act that allows Shelby County to do what it did. So now we're on this road now where we're getting ready to destroy the Voter Rights Act that was passed back in 1965. So now we're trying to get rid of that. And so by doing allowing Shelby County to do what they did meant that now any state had the right to do this. Now, just so give you some pretext on that, the Chief Justice John Roberts has been an opposer to the Civil Rights Act of 1965 ever since he came into law. He didn't think it was necessary to do anything of the sort for Black people to have the right to vote. So now he's being an ally to these folk that are trying to destroy voting rights and to take everything away from those that don't look like you. That's the whole thing with Shelby County. That's what Shelby was about. So with Shelby, it just meant that, now states just had the right to do pretty much anything that they wanted to do. They didn't need, to get any kind of clearance from Department of Justice. They could just do it. They could just do it. So now, as we get to this point, and what we understand now is that as this is taking place, the only thing that's happening is that they're chipping away at the Voters' Right Act. They're chipping away at it. So Shelby was the first piece to fall. Now, this is part of Section 2. For those who don't understand the Voting Rights Act, if you go and pull up the Voting Rights Act of 1965, you're going to see what Section 2 and Section 3, which are the hearts of the whole entire bill, is what Republicans and racists in this country are going after. This is what they were going after. They chipped away at this part of Section 2, which caused a problem. That means that once they get more and more power over the years as we're going through, and remember, this is 2013. This is how they're chipping away at this. So now we get to 2013, and now we're at the movement. Now we're at where the Black Lives Matter movement takes place. Okay, this is the politics and the demand for accountability. So now, to demand for accountability for those that don't look like the folk that were protesting, they're saying they're being racist, they're being violent, they're being cruel. They ain't went out and killed no person. They didn't break no laws. They were simply doing what they had the right to do. But you have people in this country that lied, especially mainstream media, which will not give you this entire breakdown. Mainstream media lied. Mainstream media put out lies and stories about folks were stealing money from the nonprofit of Black Lives Matter to try and dismantle the organization. They came up with lies to destroy that organization, putting people in jail and just doing whatever was necessary. And then having people believe that. See, that was false media back then, but you didn't have nobody black that was running around talking about all this false media. The media is bad. Nobody did that, which we should have. But the context, and again, what I'm trying to understand is, why does the truth hurt so many people? I really want to know that. So I think what some of these folk are thinking is that it's just better off left unsaid and just let bygones be bygones. I think that's what the premise to what they're saying. I really don't know. Maybe they can clear that up for me, because I don't understand what you're saying. I really don't. So at any rate, the Black Lives Movement brought about accountability, because they wanted accountability for what was taking place. Now, these young people organized, they got out and did what they needed to do, and they made that difference. They made that difference. They were making that difference. So as they're making this difference, now you got folk that's attacking them and telling lies on them and saying that they're committing all kinds of violence. And so now, which is basically a deflection from what's happening via Shelby County, where they're actually trying to strip away parts of the Voting Rights Act for Black folks. Well, any minority. I'll just put it to you like that. For any minority, but predominantly for the Black folk, because it's the Black vote that's being hurt more than any other vote. So, as that's happening, and you know, when they were talking about the things that needed to happen, all of that came at the cost of voting. Voting still, for some people, I'm trying to understand what is the problem with Black people that are citizens of this country. What is the problem with having the Black vote counted properly? That's what I want to know. That's what we all should be demanding, actually, because as we get further into this, you guys are going to learn some things that probably no one is really going to tell you anyway. But because of how I think that we all deserve to know the truth, I'm definitely going to put the truth out. But I will say this as well. I want for any of you that feel like that this truth is too much to handle, too much to bear, and it's too much for your soul, I'm going to tell you, hey, you just need to do what you need to do, because this is not going to happen today. Because today we're going to give you all of this truth, because as we do this series finale, this series finale is going to leave a major impact in telling you why independence is the best way to go if you are a minority and you vote. I tell you. So anyway, we're going to go into the power where Georgia flipped, okay? November 2020, the vote counting, the organizing days, Pennsylvania called Georgia impossibly called. And then January 5th, 2021, 2 runoffs, 2 Senate seats, and the pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church wins, as well as John Ossoff. They won. So now we're getting into moving up into the 2018 election. This is where Stacey Abrams and Fair Fight, the organization that she put together, they did some canvassing that was unbelievable. They really did some canvassing. And I mean, they brought they brought people into the election process, into the voting process, that had never voted before. All of these people are legal. All of these people are legal. And the scary part about it is nobody thought that this would happen. And it was clear, the repudiation of Donald Trump. It was clear, that repudiation. It was clear. So what they did is, while she was in the state senate here in Georgia, and she decided that she was going to run for governor. So now, if she's running for the gubernatorial seat, Stacey's running against Brian Kemp, which should have recused himself from that position. He did not recuse himself. He did not. And so Stacey was not going to back down from this, because she knew that she could win, and she should have won. What Brian Kemp did is 340,000 voter registrations were put in pending or suspended, which means there was 340,000 votes that did not count. And so this meant that it was documented that approximately 70% of the affected vote, of that 340,000 votes, 70% of that was black. 70%. Now, for those of you outside of Georgia, what I want to make sure you understand is that then at that point, Metro Atlanta, this is 2018, Metro Atlanta had went through a growth spurt where more than 1 million new people were here. So as we fast forward today, Metro Atlanta now itself, Metro Atlanta holds more than 11 million people. Now, remember, Fulton County controls 9 to 11 counties underneath it. Atlanta has 9 to 11 counties, shall I say, underneath it. Atlanta's the capital of Georgia. The vote and the people here, of all multiculturals that are here, all multiculturals are here. You go to the north, you've got the Asian population, you've got a lot of Latino population, you also have an enormous amount of black population, but you also have an enormous amount of white population that's there. You go to the south, it's majority black, but it still consists of that same multicultural. You come out east, you go out east, majority black, but there's a multicultural out there, and it does what it does. When you come out west, where I am, there are, and the dynamics are the same. So the dynamics dictate that there's an enormous amount of black folk that's here in Atlanta. Okay, because it's all considered Atlanta. Metro Atlanta is Atlanta. And so with that being said, and all of the counties that's controlled, all of the top counties, that includes Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, Douglas, all inside this metro area, had all dissented away from the Republican Party. They were all dissenting. The trend went way left, and it's continuously going left. Now, I'm saying this to say is that, you can do a lot of things to cause harm to an enormous amount of people. You can always try to put out things that are going to be bad for others because you want to control and repress people. But that's not the way that works, because these votes are proving that. These votes are proving that. So what that shows is that, with this election with Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp, they closed an enormous amount of polling places. They closed an enormous amount of them. Like maybe over 60 polling places were closed. Okay, which had more lines, people standing in line for up to 4 to 8 hours before they could vote. Some people just left because they just were not going to. They were not going to stand in line all that time. So Brian Kemp was declared the winner with 50.22% of the votes. Stacey Abrams had 48.83% of the vote, but there was also a Libertarian candidate that got 37,235 votes. Now, so let's just put that in context, because the margin that Stacey lost by was 54,723 votes. Now, this was the horrible thing about this is that Stacey had people that looked just like her on the celebrity side that was out there running for trying to pull Brian Kemp up, tear her down, and lie about her campaign, and committing misinformation and having folk vote for people other than her. Yeah, that's what happened. That's what happened. That's real. That's real. That's why when it comes to these folk that call themselves celebrities, I said this before and I'm gonna say it again. People, you need to make sure that you stay within reality and not fantasy. Because a lot of these people will give you this misinformation and not tell you the truth and try to sway you to vote for people that they want you to vote for, where you need to vet. I don't care who it is. You need to vote people regardless. You need to vet people regardless of the case before you give them your vote, because your vote is very sacred. Because your vote is an investment. And if you invest that vote, that means you need to expect a return. You see, both the Republican Party that initially got its rise from Black folk, we got an investment initially, but then it started to turn. Then we went to support, not wanting to be, not loyalists for the Democratic Party, but went and started voting for the Democratic Party. Still have not got a return yet. No return. None. No return. The slaughter and everything that's happening with Black people still takes place, but there's no political party that's doing what it needs to do to change that. That's why I'm telling you, independence is the best way to go, because I don't see any political party doing what it needs to do when it comes to Black people. We need to totally get away from any party whatsoever doing what we have to do, and we decide who we want to vote for, and we support our own candidates. Because I think if we did that, we could still do what's necessary in order to go back to the originalities of what things should be, what things should look like, and make things right. So we get to 2020, and after the work that Fair Fight, the Stacey Abrams group that she put together, what they did is that when they canvassed, and all these folk now are just active now when it comes to voting, the 2020 campaign on November 3rd, 2020, nearly 5 million people voted, and that was the highest in state history. Joe Biden had carried Georgia by 11,779 votes, which is what Donald Trump, and they played the phone call where Trump called Raffensperger on the phone and said, "You need to find me 11,779 votes." So I want you to know they did this recount 2 times. Nothing changed. Nothing changed, but Georgia had flipped blue. And this was the first time since Bill Clinton won Georgia in 1992. So that was the first time in 28 years. So with that, Black voters increased by 20% in that 2020 campaign compared to 2016. And so with that, white voters also increased by 16%. The Latino participation surged to 72%, and the Asian vote doubled. Yeah, these are the numbers. So I'm not making this up. You can go and find this out for yourself. You can go and find this out for yourself. So when it came to the Senate race, also that went to the runoff in January of 2021, both Ossoff and Warnock were running. And on January 5th, when they did the runoff, Raphael Warnock was going up against Kelly Loeffler. John Ossoff was going up against David Perdue. And so the New Georgia Project group that was also working with Fair Fight. I mean, they had two organizations going. The New Georgia Project winners also did a good job as well, because over this whole span, between this time up until 2021, they turned out more than 500,000 voters. More than 500,000. But so when they seen that both Warnock and Ossoff won their races, and Warnock beat Kelly Loeffler 51-49. Ossoff won 50.6 to 49.4. So Warnock became the first ever elected senator from the state of Georgia. And, they went to the Senate, it flipped the Senate, and things just changed. Well, they were trying to change, but there was nothing that went into play that could have changed, what was happening as they're chipping away at the Voters' Right Act. From 2014 to 2020, Georgia's voter registration grew from 5.2 million to 7.6 million. And the increase that was 2.4 million over 6 years, the New Georgia Project alone, they were responsible for over 500,000 of those registrations. And the registration gains among Black, Latino, and Asian voters significantly outpaced white registration growth. So that gap is what caused a problem here in Georgia. So I want to give you guys an update on Georgia and the gerrymandering. They actually had thought about doing that, but now they're saying that's now off the table. That's now off the table. So Georgia's staying the same. Nobody's putting no bills through to try to change this. This is real. This is where it's going right now. So you're getting what you're getting. So with that being said, so when I talk about the presidential elections, that is the one in 2008 with Barack Obama, where Georgia won, the Republican, John McCain, won Georgia by 5.2% of the vote. When Barack ran against Mitt Romney in 2012, Romney won by 7.8%, 7.8 points. In 2016, Hillary Clinton lost Georgia to Donald Trump by 5.1 points. But in 2020, Biden won by less than a point. So, as we think about all of the growth here in Georgia, with the playbook, the blueprint that was given by Fair Fight and the New Georgia Project, I'm trying to understand, why is it that not more states have not taken this blueprint, used it, get out your vote in all of your major areas? Now, what's true to form is, I said this and I'll say it again, and that is, Black people should be thinking more about independence when it comes to voting. because when it comes down to the things that matter most to us, they do not come through the political process. Now, you know, the John Lewis bill that was for voting rights, to add to it, right? It passes the House, but it dies in the Senate. Why is that? Why is that? Why is that? But you know, I'll just say this, and this is not about a blow for blow, an eye for an eye, or any of that. You know, I think telling you guys the truth is the best way to go. And so I want you to understand one thing. This ain't about, oh, I'm being racist, because I can't be, because I don't control anything other than my platform. I don't run the country. I'm not taking away rights from nobody. I'm giving you information. I'm giving you factual information. And I will say this, for those that support what's happening now and this continued repression against Black people, I call that racist. I absolutely call that racist. And if you support that, you are a racist. I'm saying that because I mean that. And if you can show me anything different, then that's fine. But I will say this. I think when you are the benefactor and privileged from what's at stake that allows you to go out and commit crimes, kill folk, do drugs, sell drugs, steal, and you don't have to pay for it, that's being privileged. And if you got that kind of privilege, then I doubt very seriously you want to give that up. I doubt very seriously you want to give that up. But I will say this, is that when it comes to voting, because voting means more than anything, and a lot of people taking that for granted when you shouldn't. Because getting out to vote is the best thing that you could possibly do. You see, if it wasn't, then you will understand why is it that then you would know. Why are these people trying to take away my right to vote? Hell, if you don't vote, you say, I don't vote anyway. So if you don't vote, then you should be wondering, why are they trying to take away people's right to vote? It holds power. It holds power. It's doing what it's supposed to do. But if it's doing what it's supposed to do, that means you need to get your ass out and do what you got to do. That means go vote. If you don't like who's running, again, I said this before in the very first episode. If you don't like who's running, write in who you want to vote for. Do it that way. But at least you voted. Stop sitting there and thinking, because you hear these folk on the mainstream media talking about, well, it does not matter if you vote or not, then you don't have to vote. No, that's not true. People die for that right for one reason. Reconstruction started on that very rule, that very same tactic. Black people got out to vote, and they were voting big time in 1875. When they did the insurrection then, the 10, 11, 12 years after that, when they did that insurrection, they took away the right for Black people to vote. Those rights were taken away. All the way up until we got to 1964-65, where they had to pass another bill. Black folks have always gotten out to vote. That's our civic duty. Get out there and vote. And I still say, think about being independent and stop looking at a particular party. I don't support either party. I'm telling you that as a matter of fact. I do not. I do not. because I think party loyalty gets you nowhere. I want you guys to have a wonderful evening. I appreciate you guys for taking the time to be here with us today. This was the conclusion of Black Right and the right to representation and the fight for representation, because we did a good thing. Check for the resources for each of these episodes. Check for the resources and many other things that we have for you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you guys next week for another great episode of Changing Trends and Times, as we continue to give you the truth and nothing but the truth, and to put it out there to where you are able to make your own logical decisions as to how you move. Think about it, do what's best, and we will see you guys next week. Have a great evening.